Ewing and Chris Seper.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Before I begin talking with Paul, I just want to remind everybody this is an interactive conference. If you have questions, I've loved hearing the questions from everybody so far. Simply raise your hand going up. You see the people walking in the aisle, and we'll keep asking those questions as you go up. Sometimes I think actually you all ask better questions than I do. So we'll definitely keep that going. Paul, you are one of the, I think you might be the Pharma representative here at Engage, and it's going to be great to talk to you about engagement. I think that Pfizer has, a distinct vision for where engagement is heading, and I'd like you just to start by kind of articulating that.
Yeah, so I guess to start off with, talking about our framework for viewing patient engagement is, I think, something we'd probably share with many of the folks who are here, which is looking at the patient journey, right? So for many years, actually, a huge threshold was crossed in the late 90s when we were allowed to start reaching out to the consumer directly. But even prior to that, via our patient dialogue support efforts with the HCP, the goal has been to move patients along that patient journey from initial stage symptom awareness, disease state awareness, to some kind of activation around the disease state to take an action that would be beneficial to one's health. And with increasing specificity, a doctor conversation to figure out, in collaboration with the HCP, what the best course of action is, whether it's a pharmaceutical intervention or whether that's a diet and lifestyle modification, and then to support long-term healthy behaviors. So it may be taking a medicine, it may be, again, diet and exercise related. So our construct for looking at patient engagement, I think, is something that we share with many of the folks who are here and sync up really nicely with a lot of the conversation we've been having. The current opportunity in patient engagement for us, viewed along that journey, really falls into a few different categories. One of them is around tools. So with mobile technologies, and digital technologies more broadly, we have the ability to support patients along that journey in myriad new ways. So you think about all the things that stop someone's progress, right? So there's lack of information, lack of awareness, inertia, denial, confusion, to the point even when you have folks walking out of the doctor's office with a script in their hand who are not convinced that they should actually be on that drug, or they're convinced but they just, for whatever reason, deprioritize it and don't take the drug. So there are all kinds of things that can stop you along that journey, and actually people regress. So when we look at new tools, they may be a targeted application. So for instance, we have, for some of our products, mobile copay activation. So you might need cost assistance with your product, and the ability to get that via a mobile device is new. But when you think about the convenience there, so you're at point of fill, you're in the pharmacy, and you can actually activate that copay right there, as opposed to having to stop, put that down, go back home, download a copay card, come back to the pharmacy. I mean, obviously, it's a huge convenience benefit there. There's a whole suite of tools we have for patients who are trying to stop smoking, patients with fibromyalgia, and those are now digitally delivered, which is an incredible force multiplier versus sort of traditional 20-page or trifold brochure interventions that just don't respond dynamically to the needs of the patient. So the tools piece is huge. There's also a data and information piece. So we were hearing in the previous presentation about feedback loops. Very strong agreement that is going to unlock a lot of opportunities for us in terms of supporting patients. Just seeing how you're doing, whole wide range of metrics, and everything from pain to conditions like ED and OAB to conditions where you have lab results that'll show you exactly how you're doing. Again, for the patients to be able to see that information is tremendously powerful and something we absolutely want to support. So there's tools, there's information and how that information is presented. And finally, there's partnerships. So how do we partner more broadly with folks who are having the actual touch points with the patients? So as the provider of pharmaceutical solutions, we have obviously products that we think are beneficial to patient health. We also know a lot about those products, I would say more than anyone else, about the products that we make. We also know a lot about patients. But at the end of the day, everything we do needs to be driving towards supporting a productive patient-doctor dialogue. And so the partnership that we would embark on would be everything from how do we best deliver convenient solutions or support clinical workflow for the physician, how do we have patient education or patient support tools that can help the doctor deliver the care or deliver messages to the patient, to looking at the broader world of EMR and EHR, how can we integrate potential solutions that'll help the HCP or the patient in that context. So again, very broad brush, but those are really the areas that we're looking at. And again, it all goes back to that patient journey and trying to best work in collaboration with others to support patients along that.
And so for you, in that feedback loop with the physician, how there's a lot of people contributing. There's the payer contributing. There's the provider, obviously, who's there. There's other folks. What does pharma uniquely bring to that feedback loop that others might not be able to?
Well, I think one of the things we do, obviously, we have tremendous amount of information about our products. And so if we are talking about patients who are actually on the medication, there is the intersection between the patient data and the patient sort of response and the information about the product itself. So we certainly bring that. We also have very deep knowledge of the patients in each of our disease states. Before we market a product, we've generally spent years studying the patients with fibromyalgia, smokers, various kinds of pain, people with RA, oncology conditions. So we know patients very well, and that is honestly, it's a treasure trove of insight. Finding ways to partner with stakeholders to deliver those insights in an effective way is a very exciting opportunity for us.
Is it, and that's big data, right? And is there a part of big data that Pfizer or Pharma is looking to crunch and process and better understand more than others right now when it comes to this area of patient engagement?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a few places. One of them certainly is when you look at patient-reported data and the ability of mobile specifically to have real-time, ubiquitous feedback coming back in. On the patient level, for the HCP, that could potentially be very valuable. But aggregated and looking at what sort of asthma exacerbations occur when and where, and looking at why, I think this is, honestly, it's not a pharma specific incentive, but it's something that we would be very interested in supporting because it is going to unlock a lot of potential.
So adherence, getting patients to adhere to medications isn't just a low-hanging fruit. It seems like it's the central strategy going forward to keep moving and leveraging technology on.
Yeah, adherence is really interesting for us because, again, I mentioned there are two kinds of patients really. There's the patient who leaves the doctor's office with the script in hand and feels they've got a really good therapy that they're about to take, and they want to take that therapy. But for whatever reason, and there are a zillion things we don't do stuff in life that we want to do. There's a lot of behavioral interventions and behavioral economics applications to helping those patients actually do what they want to do, which is to take the medication. So reminders, incentives, ways in which you can create communities of people who are engaged in the same activity, feedback loops. There is another segment of folks who walk out of the doctor's office with a script, but are still not fully convinced that that's a drug they should be on. And again, a zillion reasons for that, right? So some of these products are products that you will literally be on for the rest of your life. Generally speaking, these are things that people have some reluctance about. So they also may have worries about side effects. They may be worried about cost ramifications, et cetera. That's a different kind of solution. I think digital plays a big role in addressing those concerns as well. But it's very different from the reminder-based. You start to remind those people and actually you'll probably get nowhere because they still haven't bought into the fundamental value.
There has been a lot of reporting recently about Pfizer and its embrace of mobile, not only from the standpoint that you're getting more traffic and just simply adjusting your sites, but I think there's developing new platforms and new digital solutions. Where is Pfizer going specifically around mobile engagement?
Yeah, I think the key is, and this is stuff that's well known to everyone in the audience, frankly anyone who owns a smartphone, but when you look at the way the unique attributes of mobile link up to the unique attributes of most disease states. So there's ubiquity, the fact that it's always with you, the fact that if you have a need for information and you're on the beach or a crosstown bus, you can get that information immediately. The ability to access a world of information at any time is hugely important. Also, the ability to report how you're doing at any time is hugely important for us. So, for instance, in the area of hemophilia, we have, it's very important for patients with hemophilia to track their bleeds. It's a critical area, and you think about how you do that without a mobile device versus how you do that with an application that is written specifically for the tracking of hemophilia bleeds. And so we have an application in that area. It provides patients and doctors with not just a tool to do that, but then a construct to foster and improve the patient-doctor dialogue. So there is, that's certainly a huge area of leveraging the unique ability of mobile to be there at any time in a way that's fairly unobtrusive and sort of syncs up with the rest of your life.
And I think you touched on it there, leveraging digital to improve that experience. You mentioned obviously Pfizer knows about its drugs better than anyone else. The physician probably is the number 2 person in that position. What keeps them from engaging with patients as effectively as they could, just in the experience that Pfizer's had, to better have an experience with a patient?
What keeps the HCPs?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I honestly feel the HCP does a good job, but there's pressures, obviously, on time, on information. You have potentially disease states such as fibromyalgia, where you have complicated symptom sets, and diagnosis is complicated in some of these areas. And so, I think honestly, rather than focusing in on the ways in which it's not working, I think that we just are working from the assumption that anything you can do to simplify effectively, to simplify complexity, make large amounts of information relevant quickly, which is basically all the core attributes of digital, are things that are going to improve the dialogue.
Sure, absolutely. We're getting closer to the halfway point, so I want to give anybody a chance who might have a question to raise their hand. We have one up here. Our microphone is on its way with the speed of digital.
Yes, a lot of the examples that you gave are in the consumer model, and probably built on iOS or HTML5 platform, things like that. What are you looking at for deeper engagement with the healthcare system? HL7-3 phase we're in right now, but we're moving to a FHIR where you'd have HL7 FHIR program that's going through standards right now, where it allows a lot more widgets, APIs, a lot more of the characteristics that we're familiar with on the consumer side coming into the enterprise space. From your perspective on this digital engagement and everything, where are you in looking at this consumer focus versus the enterprise focus?
Yeah, and so it's a great question. I should probably stress that we're scratching the surface on this right now. I believe that it's going to be, so it's a very interesting space, first of all. It's also a space for partnership, whereas we can launch our own patient-directed mobile app and put it up in the iTunes store and people can download that app. This is all going to be stuff that we do in collaboration. We're very interested in exactly the kind of stuff you're talking about and exploring those options. I think that the idea of how we can integrate service offering or value delivery into the EMR context, for instance, is an area that we have not fully explored, but we see as being really high potential.
Can I give one more chance to look for other questions? But I think that from what I think we talked about this earlier, that you're ready to launch a new platform to help patients take their meds. I know it hasn't come out yet, so I know there's a lot you can't say about it, but really, is there things you can talk about in what's coming next for Pfizer? Yeah,
so the program that you're referring to is an adherence-based platform where you, once you get your prescription, you can enroll in a reminder program. You either get text reminders or desktop reminders. You can actually get hard mail reminders if you want. And this is a platform offering, yeah, exactly, non-digital, and you get reinforcement for long-term adherent behavior.
within Pfizer, what made this the appropriate time to roll this out? I mean, was there feedback that you were getting? Was there a technological barrier that broke through? What made this the appropriate time for something like this to come out?
Yeah, I think it's a confluence of a bunch of things. One of them is the ability to build digital platforms. I think smartphone penetration is huge. So the ability for us to launch increasingly sophisticated mobile solutions on devices that simplify those solutions for the end users. Obviously, demographically, smartphone penetration, the smartphone users are getting closer and closer to our core demographic for a lot of our diseases, which tend to skew a little bit older. And frankly, behavioral economics, where we understand a lot more now about motivators for patient behavior than we used to. So there are a lot of assumptions around, reasons why people do not take their drugs, which have been informed by the study of why people do anything and why people don't do stuff they know is good for them. So I think it's really built on both knowledge and technology that didn't exist previously.
And you on that, I mean, there's been the discussion about using online recruitment. I mean, Pfizer's been one of the few companies that's gone ahead and done online recruitment and virtual follow-up on patient engagement when it comes to clinical trials. Are there lessons learned from that that have been valuable that you can apply more to the models you're looking at now?
Yeah, I would say that probably the experience within the clinical trials area is stuff that we're taking those learnings and feeding them back into the clinical trials area. That is an area that's it's quite distinct from the commercial model in a lot of ways, and the imperatives are different. I think that how to engage a patient and how to best serve a patient, and certain things like UI and what is turnkey and intuitive to use from a patient perspective. Certainly, those learnings are universal. But obviously the digital support for that activity is just there's tremendous potential.
And we have patients in the audience, and I think that Pharma, you talked about it earlier, has been going to direct to consumer in one way for quite a long time. As things grow, what parts of that are you going to shed, and what parts of that are going to be maintained and integrated? I think about this because I thought that Pocket Doc's idea about marketing as a sign of respect is interesting, and just wonder again, what do you think what's going to remain from the old philosophies, and what's going to stick forward as you're still working directly with consumers? Yeah,
I mean, for me, at least the philosophy is not changing, which is that patients who are educated and are motivated to speak to their HCPs about their symptoms. It's a universal good, right? So we have people who are going in, they're more educated. The conversation is a richer conversation. They have context for understanding the dialogue with the doctor. If they leave with a script or do not leave with a script, they understand why. And so all of it is good. Television historically has been a great medium for reaching lots of people. I think digital is a little bit different because it allows more of a laser focus on specific areas. So for instance, in the case of Viagra, there is a huge sort of illegitimate Viagra market, and the ability to get specific digital tools that enable people to get fill of real Viagra versus counterfeit Viagra is really important. And that's a digitally enabled solution that we've launched. So something like that, where you have a laser focus on a specific issue, that's something that digital enables in a way that's different. So I don't think the philosophy is changing so much, but I think the new tools allow us to focus in on specific barriers in a better way.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I always would look at that as, obviously you're protecting consumers from counterfeit Viagra. It's also protecting margin and obviously protecting the business from Pfizer itself. Is there, and you've talked a little bit about fibromyalgia and I think a little bit of hemophilia, maybe you can touch on it more there. The unique ways or different ways where technology is being leveraged to even further empower that patient to eliminate not taking meds or going on, as we talked, drug vacations or simply just never starting meds. Is there a way that technology is going to be able to do that more effectively, and pharma contribute to that versus a payer contributing to it or someone else?
Yeah, I think the partnership, the question that was asked earlier, I think the partnership model is probably the wave of the future here, because at the end of the day, we provide a product. We'll continue to provide a raft of sort of supportive services. In smoking cessation, we have a whole module for how to quit smoking, and that is digitally enabled. But at the end of the day, the touch points with the patient are primarily within the HCP context, the retail or the trade context, and it will be in the IDS/IDN context. The actual care will be delivered in the EMR, EHR space. There will be patient portals that will engage the patient post-RX. All of these are areas in which, honestly, we are going to be required to partner with others. We want to partner with others because those are not touch points that we hold within Pfizer. So I think that the broad piece is we're looking at innovation, but we're looking at innovation in the context of partnership.
A question?
My name's Betsy Weaver, and I'm the CEO and president of Ubicare in Boston. And I'm interested in something that you sort of almost got to, but I think I'd really like to know what you think about it. I think one of the extraordinary potentials of mobile, which really hasn't been addressed very much, is the anonymity of it. Meaning that you were talking about the connection between the provider and the patient, but there's also a place and a time, and I wonder if pharma has a role in terms of having information which you can get, reliable, legitimate information that you can get, but that nobody knows you got it, meaning that you're able to access information that might have stigma associated with it or might have information that you wouldn't want other people to know, maybe even your provider. And I wonder if there is a role with mobile and maybe pharma where that could be made more accessible. In a funny way, you're anonymous, but it's available for you in a way that you can stay anonymous but get the real information that you need. This is particularly true about anything that has a high stigma in the workplace or with your family or community or...
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think speaking broadly, I agree that there is, and as I was saying before, there is so much information coming across, potentially from mobile devices, that can improve the quality of care. Frankly, much of that opportunity is between patients and their doctors, and for some very specific reasons, including HIPAA and a variety of other constraints, we are not allowed to be part of that dialogue. I think the patient-doctor dialogue, with patient opt-in obviously as being a prerequisite even to that, there's tremendous benefit there, and if there is a way in which we could best support that, that's great. In terms of our specifically leveraging that or knowing about patient data at the patient level, we have real limitations. If that makes sense.
I think it begs the question, though. In other words, I think that, of course, we all agree that that's the relationship you want. You have treasure trove of information from patients. You have treasure trove, lots of information about the drug. But you're also, think of a large situation where I'd like to know more about a particular drug, but I don't really want a whole lot of other people to know. I'm not saying, of course, it would be impossible. You don't want to circumvent HIPAA, but on the outside of that, there are more and more anonymous places where I could potentially go, but be sure that I get good information, meaning that I don't have to, it doesn't have to be through my provider that I get that. Yeah. And I think that, again, pharma, with the information you have, potentially has a very interesting role there in that space.
And so fully agree with, if the flow is in that direction of information from us to the patient, giving them information that's tailored to their specific needs, fully agree. It's a huge opportunity, and it's tailored information, and information, honestly, that can be delivered in a range of forums. And we're trying to do that. So, for instance, next to Google, YouTube is the biggest sort of search engine used on the web, and also owned by Google, so they're doing pretty well. So the idea of having a presence on YouTube for people who are looking for information on YouTube became apparent to us as a critical priority. So we launched a bunch of branded YouTube stations to provide that information. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but I guess the point is looking at the sort of patient's sort of sense-making or decision-making pathway. There are lots of points where they will have questions, and in some cases may need very discrete answers to those questions. And I agree, we can play a role in providing that information.
Another question.
There's another theory of evolution about where this engagement will come from in the pharmaceutical space, and that's that really a lot of the things you're talking about will be driven by the PBMs, the pharmacy benefit management companies, the Merck Medco and Caremark. How do you see the relationship going forward with their experience with almost a more direct patient engagement than the pharma companies have as all these things evolve?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the point again, and being conscious of two things. First of all, time, and the second thing being that we're scratching the surface on this. I would say the partnership model probably applies there as well, right? So looking at if there are specific ways in which we can better deliver value in partnership with that kind of an entity, we'll definitely explore that. But I mean, I'm not sure I'm ready to sort of say that their role is potentially greater than that of a Pfizer, simply because we have such deep understanding and knowledge of our products and patients.
Is your concern over, you talked about scratching the surface a couple times, and it sounds in many ways there's a cognizant effort to leverage, traditional media, digital medias and the like. Is it because of regulation, fears over, concerns over being accused of off-label use if you're more proliferate and active in patient engagement? Because in many of the ways you say it sounds like in many ways you want to be the kind of the invisible hand that's working with the physician, but not necessarily enhancing or being more aggressive about what you're already doing with patients directly. Yeah,
I guess the characterization probably of our goal in partnership is simply because pharmaceuticals we've never had those touch points have never been with us, right? So we're not like retail or pharmacy. We're not like hospitals. We've traditionally made a product that is sold in an amber bottle, and the customer quotes, customer relationships, the patient-doctor relationships are things that we are supportive of and always have been supportive of, but it has not been, that's not really the core of our business to date. I think obviously we're in a world where offering many different kinds of digital solutions is possible, and so if we can do that and better support those interactions, that's great. But no, I don't think we're at the point where we are, looking at reinventing the model of care delivery unilaterally, on a pharmaceutical side. I think that the how we can best support existing and developing and new models is really high on our priority list.
Yes, hi, I'm a Chief Medical Officer of Health Prize. We offer a rewards-based system to keep people on their meds. And in our pharmaceutical clients and potential clients, we often butt up against a perception issue that they're worried about, in that we know that greater adherence equals better outcomes. And we also know that greater adherence for pharma means better revenue, obviously. So they're always worried that if they sponsor a program, even though outcomes and drug efficacy is the goal, that the public will perceive the revenue motive as trumping the outcomes motive. And do you have any creative thoughts about how to overcome that perception issue?
Yeah. So I mean, I think, and obviously I do know Health Prize well. There's a couple of things. I think there is, on the perceptual issue, our greatest opportunity really lies in the shared incentive for patients to advance along that journey. So if you have patients who have been, their doctor has said, you should be on this medication, and there is some way in which we can incent through feedback or some other way, long-term adherent behavior, then that's really interesting to us. I think that the perceptual issues, if it's grounded in that area, I think we're okay. The issue, obviously, that's also important here is restrictions around incenting script and any sort of actual value being given to a patient for taking a medication, which is, understandably and rightly something that is very closely regulated. So I think if those two things can be addressed, going back to my comments before about behavioral economics, we absolutely agree that finding appropriate rewards for long-term healthy behaviors is something we want to investigate further. Does that make sense? All right, good.
We have about a minute to go, and so I see another question over here in the corner. Go ahead.
My name is Charlie Havidi. We've got a company that's about ready to introduce a low-cost outpatient services outlet for supermarkets, pharmacies, community centers, universities, schools, etc. And basically provide that health care for outpatient services at a very low cost, lower than anything that's on the market today. Digital platform backed up by a medical call center with medical staff. So they can actually prescribe medicine, and based on a lot of comments by people in the audience, I see we need to tie that call center into patient portals. But my question is, that's going to be a new paradigm in delivery of health care, and a new paradigm in collecting medical information, both patient-specific as well as, let's say, aggregated with outpatient attribution. And it could be used as a low-cost way of participating with pharmaceutical companies for clinical trials. And then your programs for your products would then complement the follow-through on how well the patients are doing. Is that something of interest to the pharmaceutical industry?
So,
And will you sign that contract right now?
yes. The element that you mentioned, so all of it sounds interesting. I think the e-diagnosis or virtual diagnosis element is something we are already exploring actively, and on Chantix.com, for instance, that is an option. It's not appropriate for all of our disease states, but in certain cases, to my point again about the patient journey, and obviously you know this very well because it sounds like your offer is targeted at exactly this. That could be the thing that gets you over the barrier. So yeah, would love to continue the dialogue, but we're thinking along the same lines in the e-diagnosis area especially.
Great, thank you.
And that concludes our half hour. I really appreciate you coming up here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Great.